My son thought I hadn't noticed him putting something strange in my backpack, smiling as if nothing had happened. But when he turned away, I quietly put it in his drawer. 30 minutes later, the police arrived. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. Terry's fist slammed against the oak table. The salt shaker toppled, scattering white crystals across the surface like broken glass. My fork froze halfway to my mouth, a piece of meatloaf still impaled on the tines. "Dad, we need another 2,000 this month." The words hit harder than his fist had hit the table. I set my fork down slowly, deliberately, the metal clinking against the ceramic plate. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. Zella sat across from me, her wedding ring catching the overhead light as she twisted it around her finger. Her makeup was smudged beneath her eyes. She'd been crying before dinner. "Enough!" The word came out sharper than I intended. "You're 28, Terry. It's time to learn to provide for your wife yourself." He towered over me, his face flushed with anger, or desperation. Sometimes it was hard to tell the difference with my son. The refrigerator hummed behind him, a steady drone that filled the spaces between our heavy breathing. "You're being selfish." Terry's voice cracked slightly. "Mom would have understood us. She would have helped." The mention of Martha struck like a physical blow. I felt my jaw tighten, my hands clench involuntarily. Zella's quiet sobbing began, muffled by the napkin she pressed to her face. The green beans on my plate had gone cold, congealing in their butter sauce. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the linoleum with a harsh, grating sound that made Zella flinch. The overhead fixture cast harsh shadows across all our faces, turning this family dinner into something resembling an interrogation. "I've given you $1,200 this month alone," I said, standing slowly. My knees protested. I wasn't as young as I used to be. Before that, it was the wedding venue, the apartment deposit you never used, Zella's medical bills. "Dad, please." "No." I stepped away from the table, away from them both, the smell of cooling meatloaf mixed with the tension thick enough to cut. "I won't enable this anymore." Terry's breathing was heavy, ragged. Zella had stopped crying, but her eyes remained fixed on her plate, as if the pattern on the china could solve all our problems. The clock above the sink ticked toward 7:35. I walked toward the kitchen doorway, not looking back. My footsteps felt heavier than usual, each one a small defeat. Behind me, I heard Zella whisper something to Terry, urgent and pleading. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear enough. The wooden stairs creaked under my weight as I climbed toward my bedroom. Each step carried me further from the wreckage of another family dinner, another failed attempt at connection. Below, their voices rose again, Terry's anger, Zella's tears, the familiar symphony of dysfunction that had become our household soundtrack. The upstairs hallway stretched before me, dark except for the light spilling from my bedroom doorway. Inside, Martha's photograph waited on the nightstand, frozen in a moment when our family still made sense. I closed the bedroom door behind me and sat heavily on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under my weight, springs protesting after 30 years of use. Martha's side remained undisturbed, the pillows still arranged exactly as she'd left them 5 years ago. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, from exhaustion, from the bone-deep weariness that comes from fighting the same battle over and over, never gaining ground. The photograph on the nightstand showed Martha in her blue dress, the one she'd worn for our 25th anniversary cruise. Her smile was radiant, genuine. I picked up the frame, traced her face with my thumb. The glass was warm under the bedside lamp's glow. "She would have understood us," Terry had said. Maybe. Martha always saw the best in everyone, especially our son, but she also believed in consequences, in teaching rather than enabling. 2 years ago, I'd sold my vintage Harley to pay for their wedding venue deposit. The bike had been my pride and joy. A 1978 Sportster I'd restored myself after Martha died. I told myself it was for love, for family. But Terry had barely thanked me, already asking about honeymoon expenses before the check cleared. 18 months later came the apartment security deposit. I'd canceled my planned fishing trip to Alaska, the one I'd been saving for since retirement. $3,000 that should have bought me mountains and solitude instead went to a landlord for an apartment they never moved into. Some excuse about changed circumstances. 6 months ago, it was Zella's medical bills. I worked overtime at 57 years old, my back screaming from construction sites I should have left behind. Every extra dollar went to specialists and tests that revealed nothing more serious than stress-induced migraines. I opened the nightstand drawer. Inside lay the stack of loan documents Terry had convinced me to sign over the past 2 years. Personal loans, credit applications, emergency fund withdrawals. My signature on each one, written in moments of paternal weakness. The paper felt thin between my fingers, fragile as my resolve had been. $47,000. That's what my son's emergencies had cost me since Martha's funeral. $47,000 that should have secured my retirement, instead of financing his irresponsibility. Martha's perfume bottle still sat on the dresser, nearly empty but uncapped. Sometimes I opened it just to remember. Tonight, the scent seemed accusatory rather than comforting. In the mirror above the dresser, I saw an old man. Tired eyes, graying hair, shoulders bent from carrying burdens that weren't mine to bear. When had I become this person? When had love become synonymous with financial rescue? Martha's last words echoed in the quiet room. Teach him to fly on his own, Ray. Don't let him live in our shadow forever. I closed the drawer firmly. The stack of loan documents disappeared behind the wooden panel, like evidence of my failures as a father. Below, their voices had dropped to urgent whispers. I could make out Terry's tone, pleading now instead of demanding. Zella's responses came in short bursts, as if she were giving instructions. Setting the photograph back on the nightstand, I turned off the bedside lamp. Darkness wrapped around me, but I didn't lie down. Instead, I sat in the quiet, listening to the house settle, to the muffled conversation downstairs, to the sound of my own breathing gradually slowing to normal. Tomorrow would be different. It had to be. The coffee maker gurgled its familiar morning song, steam rising from the glass carafe like incense in a church. I'd been awake since 5:30, unable to sleep after the night's revelations. The kitchen felt different in the early morning light, cleaner somehow, as if the darkness had washed away yesterday's confrontation. I stood at the sink in my work clothes, flannel shirt and jeans that smelled faintly of sawdust from my garage workshop. Outside the window, the neighbor's dog was barking at something invisible. Mrs. Peterson's newspaper lay in her driveway, waiting for her to shuffle out in her bathrobe. Footsteps on the stairs announced Terry's arrival. He appeared in the doorway at 7:05, wrinkled t-shirt hanging loose over boxer shorts. His hair stuck up at odd angles, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He avoided looking at me directly. "Coffee's fresh," I said without turning around. My voice sounded normal, controlled, good. "Thanks." The word came out as barely more than a mumble. I heard him fumbling with a mug, the ceramic clicking against the coffee pot as his hands shook slightly. Zella entered 2 minutes later, bathrobe wrapped tight around her small frame. Her hair was unkempt, yesterday's makeup smudged beneath puffy eyes. She'd been crying again, or maybe she'd never stopped. "Good morning," she said tentatively, hopefully, as if the right words might repair the damage from last night. I nodded without speaking. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, broken only by the coffee maker's final hiss and the distant rumble of the newspaper delivery truck. I methodically washed last night's dinner dishes, my hands moving through the familiar motions. Plate, rinse, soap, scrub. The water was almost too hot, but I welcomed the slight burn against my skin. It felt like clarity. Behind me, Terry poured coffee with unsteady hands. The liquid splashed slightly, drops hitting the counter with tiny impacts. Zella attempted to make toast, but the smell of burning bread soon filled the kitchen. She scraped the charred surface over the sink, black crumbs falling like ash. "I'm going out today," Terry announced, his voice defensive before I'd even responded. "Job interviews." I turned from the sink, finally meeting his eyes. They darted away immediately, focusing on his coffee mug instead. "Take the house key," I said quietly. The implication hung in the air. He might not be back, or maybe I wouldn't be here when he returned. Terry's face flushed, but he didn't argue. The morning sunlight streaming through the window highlighted dust motes dancing in the space between us. Everything felt suspended, waiting. I could hear my own heartbeat in the silence, steady and determined. Terry grabbed an apple from the bowl on the counter instead of sitting for breakfast. His sneakers squeaked against the linoleum as he paced toward the doorway, then back again. Nervous energy radiated from him like heat from a furnace. "Terry," I said, stopping him mid-pace. He turned, hope flickering in his eyes for just a moment. "Responsibility," I said simply. "It's not a dirty word." The hope died. His jaw tightened, and without another word, he left the kitchen. Seconds later, the front door slammed with enough force to rattle the windows. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Zella remained at the table, her burnt toast untouched on its plate. She looked at me with pleading eyes, mouth opening as if to speak. But I was already moving, pouring my coffee into a travel mug, heading toward the garage. My truck's engine turned over on the first try, a reliable rumble that had never let me down. As I backed out of the driveway, I could see Zella through the kitchen window, alone with the mess of our interrupted breakfast and the weight of whatever secrets she and Terry shared. The morning stretched ahead of me, full of possibility and dread in equal measure. Terry's animated voice reached me before I saw him. The front door had barely closed behind me when he jumped up from the sofa, his face bright with an excitement that seemed almost frantic. "Dad, I'm sorry about yesterday. TechForge Solutions hired me." The words hit me like a surprise punch. I set my lunch cooler down carefully on the hardwood floor, my work-worn hands suddenly unsteady. Terry bounded toward me with arms outstretched, pulling me into an embrace that lasted too long, held too tight. "Really?" The hope in my voice surprised me. "That's wonderful, son." Zella burst into theatrical applause from her perch in the armchair, her hands coming together in sharp, staccato claps. Her makeup was perfect, too perfect for someone who'd been crying yesterday. The bright smile painted across her face didn't quite reach her eyes. "He got the call this afternoon," she announced, as if she were narrating a game show. "Senior IT consultant position." Terry released me, but stayed close, running his hands through his hair in that nervous gesture I'd known since his childhood. His shirt was crisp, freshly ironed. When had he found time to do laundry? "I knew you had it in you," I said, feeling my shoulders relax for the first time in days. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the living room windows caught the dust motes dancing between us, making everything seem softer, more forgiving. "When do you start?" "Monday. They want me immediately." Terry's response came too quickly, as if he'd rehearsed it, his voice pitched slightly higher than usual. The familiar weight of parental pride mixed with relief began settling in my chest. Perhaps yesterday's harsh words had motivated him toward real responsibility. Maybe Martha had been right. Sometimes tough love was the only path forward, but something nagged at me. Terry kept adjusting his shirt collar, smoothing down fabric that wasn't wrinkled. His eyes darted to Zella, seeking some kind of confirmation or reassurance. "What's the salary like?" I asked, settling into my recliner. The leather creaked under my weight, a sound that usually comforted me. $65,000 to start, Terry said without hesitation, plus benefits. Health insurance, dental, retirement matching. Those were the right answers, the kind of details a real employer would provide. So why did my engineer's mind keep cataloging inconsistencies? The timing was convenient. Too convenient, perhaps. Outside, a neighbor's lawnmower roared to life, and children's laughter echoed from someone's backyard. Normal suburban evening sounds that should have felt peaceful. Instead, they seemed to underscore the artificial quality of our celebration. "This calls for a barbecue," I announced, pushing aside my doubts. "Let me fire up the grill. We can celebrate properly." Terry's face lit up. Genuine happiness this time, I thought. "That sounds perfect, Dad. Just like old times." Zella clapped again, softer now, but still performing. "I'll make my potato salad, the one with the mustard dressing you like." I stood, joints protesting after a long day on the construction site. "Give me 20 minutes to get the charcoal going. Terry, you can help me outside in a few minutes." "Actually, I need to grab something from upstairs first," Terry said, already moving toward the staircase. "Just some papers from the job interview. Want to show you the offer letter?" I nodded, heading toward the back door that led to the patio. The grill waited under its black cover like a loyal friend. Tonight felt like a new beginning, a chance to rebuild what yesterday had nearly destroyed. Behind me, I heard Terry's footsteps on the stairs, Zella moving toward the kitchen. Normal family sounds, normal family evening. "What kind of meat do you want?" I called out, already knowing Terry would choose burgers while Zella preferred chicken. The charcoal was just catching fire, small flames licking at the black lumps with increasing confidence. I wiped my hands on the kitchen towel draped over the grill handle, savoring the familiar ritual. The mild evening air carried the scent of lighter fluid and the promise of a peaceful family dinner. Terry had disappeared upstairs 10 minutes ago to fetch those interview papers. Through the kitchen window, I could see Zella moving around, supposedly preparing side dishes. Everything felt normal. Right. I turned toward the house to check if Terry wanted to help with the grill setup. The kitchen window framed the living room like a picture, warm light spilling from the overhead fixture onto familiar furniture. That's when I saw him. Terry stood near the front door, hunched over my navy blue work backpack. His movements were quick, furtive, nothing like the confident young man who just told me about his new job. He glanced around the room before unzipping the main compartment. My grip tightened on the grilling fork. What was he doing with my work bag? I took an involuntary step closer to the window, staying in the shadows cast by the patio overhang. Terry reached into his pocket and withdrew something small, wrapped in what looked like dark tissue paper. His hands moved with practiced precision as he placed the object deep inside my backpack, nestling it between my work gloves and measuring tape. The rational part of my mind scrambled for innocent explanations. Maybe a thank you gift? A surprise? But Terry's behavior, the secretive glances, the careful placement, suggested something far different. He zipped the bag closed and stepped away quickly, brushing his hands on his jeans as if wiping away evidence. The whole sequence had taken less than 30 seconds, but it felt like watching a slow-motion crime unfold. Smoke from the grill drifted around me, the acrid scent suddenly overwhelming. My stomach dropped as Terry disappeared from view, probably heading back upstairs or to the kitchen. The suburban evening sounds, distant traffic, a dog barking 3 houses down, seemed muffled now, as if the world had shifted slightly off its axis. I forced myself to turn back to the grill, mind racing. The charcoal glowed red-hot, ready for cooking, but my appetite had vanished completely. Whatever Terry had hidden in my bag felt significant, dangerous even, but confronting him now would reveal I'd been watching, spying on my own son. The back door opened with its familiar squeak. "Dad, how are those coals coming along?" Terry's voice carried that same artificial brightness from earlier. I swallowed hard, tasting ash and suspicion. "Almost ready," I managed, not turning around. "Just need a few more minutes." His footsteps approached across the wooden deck. In my peripheral vision, I saw him lean against the patio railing, picture of casual contentment. But I couldn't stop seeing those careful, secretive movements by my backpack. "You know what, son?" I said, finally facing him. "I think I left my work gloves in the garage. Mind getting them while I tend to this fire?" Terry's smile flickered for just a moment. "Sure thing, Dad. No problem at all." He headed back inside, and I watched through the kitchen window as he walked past my backpack without even glancing at it. The performance was flawless, too flawless for someone who'd been nervous about hiding something there moments earlier. Whatever was in my bag, I had to find out. But first, I needed the right opportunity. "Just grabbing some seasoning from the kitchen," I called to Zella as Terry disappeared into the upstairs bathroom. The water pipes groaned as he turned on the faucet, my signal that I had a few precious minutes. My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached the backpack. The living room felt different now, shadows deeper despite the lamp's warm glow. Every creak of the house settling seemed amplified, threatening to expose my investigation. The backpack's zipper made a soft, metallic whisper as I pulled it open. Inside lay my familiar work items: yellow measuring tape, leather gloves stained with years of honest labor, spiral notebook filled with project sketches. Everything in its usual place except for the foreign presence I'd witnessed Terry hide. My fingers probed deeper, searching through the organized chaos of my professional life. There, wrapped in dark tissue paper, nestled against the notebook's spine like a guilty secret. I unwrapped it carefully, the tissue paper crinkling loud as gunshots in the quiet room. What emerged made my breath catch in my throat. A diamond ring, massive center stone surrounded by smaller diamonds, all set in what looked like platinum. The facets caught the lamplight, throwing rainbow prisms across the coffee table and wall. I held it up, transfixed by its brilliance and terrified by its implications. This wasn't costume jewelry. The weight alone told me it was real, expensive, easily $15,000, maybe 20. More money than Terry had ever possessed, more than he could earn in months at his supposed new job. I sank into the nearest chair, legs suddenly unreliable. The ring felt hot in my palm, burning with questions I was afraid to answer. Where had Terry gotten something this valuable? Why hide it in my bag? What was he planning? Water still ran upstairs. Terry's nervous humming drifted down through the ceiling, some tune I didn't recognize. Normal sounds from my son, who was apparently anything but normal. The ring's brilliance seemed to mock me. I thought about yesterday's argument, his desperate plea for money, Zella's tears. Had they been planning this even then? Using my generosity as a cover for something darker? My engineer's mind began calculating scenarios, none of them good. If Terry had stolen this ring, putting it in my backpack made me an unwitting accomplice. If he planned to claim I'd stolen it? The water shut off upstairs. Footsteps crossed the bathroom floor. Terry would be down any moment, expecting to find me outside with the grill, playing the role of proud father celebrating his son's success. In a moment of pure instinct, I slipped the ring into my pocket and quickly repacked the backpack. The tissue paper went back in, positioned as closely as possible to how Terry had left it. My hands shook as I zipped the bag closed. Terry's footsteps reached the top of the stairs just as I stood up, legs still unsteady. The ring felt like a lead weight in my pocket. Evidence of betrayal I wasn't ready to confront. "Dad, everything okay in there?" Terry's voice carried artificial concern. "Just heading back out," I called, moving toward the kitchen on autopilot. My body functioned while my mind reeled with implications I couldn't yet process. The ring burned against my leg with each step, a constant reminder that nothing about this evening was what it seemed. Terry's voice drifted through the kitchen window as I slipped back inside. "Dad, how do you want these steaks? Medium rare?" "Whatever you think is best," I called back, my voice steady despite the storm raging in my chest. The ring felt like a burning coal in my pocket, its weight pulling at more than just the fabric of my jeans. My feet found the carpeted stairs, avoiding the third step that had creaked for 20 years. Each movement felt calculated, purposeful, an engineer's approach to solving an impossible problem. Terry had violated my personal space, my trust. Something was very wrong with this whole situation, and I wasn't going to face it blindfolded. The hallway stretched before me, lined with family photos that now seemed like evidence of a life I'd misunderstood. Terry's bedroom door stood slightly ajar, afternoon light filtering through the window that overlooked our backyard. Through the glass, I could see my son's silhouette bent over the grill, playing the role of dutiful family man. I pushed the door open slowly, testing for squeaks. The hinges remained silent, well oiled from years of maintenance. Inside, the room held the mixed scents of Zella's perfume and barbecue smoke drifting through the window. Her clothes draped over the chair, Terry's laptop closed on the desk, scattered papers nearby, the detritus of their shared deception. The dresser stood against the far wall, 3 drawers stacked like secrets waiting to be revealed. I chose the middle one, sock drawer, the most innocuous hiding place. My weathered hands moved among their intimate belongings, pushing aside cotton socks and underwear to create a small hollow. If Terry could put things in my bag without permission, I could return the favor. The tissue paper crinkled softly as I nestled the ring deep beneath their clothing, exactly where it would be found if someone came looking. "Dad, these are looking perfect out here." Terry's voice carried genuine enthusiasm, or at least a masterful imitation of it. I closed the drawer carefully, ensuring everything looked undisturbed. The room held no evidence of my presence except the faint warmth from my hands and the knowledge that their game had just changed rules. Through the window, Terry was arranging something on the patio table, his movements casual and confident. He had no idea that 30 feet above him, his plan was unraveling thread by thread. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I moved toward the hallway. Whatever Terry was planning with that ring, whatever role he'd written for me in his scheme, I'd just rewritten the script. Turnabout was fair play, and if my son wanted to play games with evidence, he'd discover that his father hadn't learned engineering, without understanding how things could be taken apart. The stairs received my weight in reverse order, avoiding familiar creaks. In the kitchen, I grabbed the bottle of steak sauce from the pantry, my excuse for being inside. Through the window, Terry waved at me, all smiles and family warmth. I stepped back onto the patio just as multiple car doors slammed in front of the house. The sound of car doors slamming cut through the evening air like gunshots. I turned toward the front of the house, spatula still raised, trying to process why multiple vehicles would arrive unannounced during our family dinner. Terry's face transformed in an instant. The casual smile vanished, replaced by something that looked like excited anticipation. He moved toward the house with sudden purpose, no longer the relaxed son helping with barbecue. "Who's here?" I asked, confusion evident in my voice. "Were you expecting someone?" "I have no idea," Terry replied, but his tone carried theatrical shock, rather than genuine surprise. "Maybe neighbors checking on the smoke?" Voices approached from the front yard, authoritative, professional. My stomach dropped as the reality hit me. These weren't neighbors. 3 uniformed officers appeared through the side gate, led by a stern-faced woman in her 40s. Her hand rested near her radio, eyes scanning our domestic scene with professional assessment. "Police! Nobody move!" I took an involuntary step backward, spatula clattering to the patio stones. Zella emerged from the kitchen carrying a salad bowl, freezing when she saw the officers. The bowl slipped from her hands, lettuce scattering across the red brick like confetti at a disaster. Terry immediately pointed at me, his finger steady and sure. "Officer, that's him! I saw the ring in his backpack." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What nonsense!" I stammered, genuine bewilderment making my voice crack. "What ring?" But Terry was already moving closer to the lead officer, his cooperation eager and practiced. Too practiced. His body language radiated confidence rather than the concern any normal son should feel, watching his father accused of crimes. "Officer Brooks," the lead officer introduced herself, studying the scene with sharp eyes. "We received a report about stolen jewelry. Terry Harlan?" "Yes, ma'am," Terry responded immediately. "I found evidence in my father's possession, a diamond ring from the jewelry store robbery downtown yesterday." Yesterday, while he'd been gone for job interviews. The pieces clicked together with mechanical precision in my engineer's mind, each revelation more sickening than the last. Officer Brooks spoke into her radio while her partners positioned themselves strategically around the patio. The barbecue continued smoking, unattended steaks beginning to char, filling the air with the acrid smell of burning meat. "Sir, we need you to step away from the grill," Officer Brooks directed me. Her tone was professional, but carried the weight of authority I couldn't ignore. I moved slowly, hands visible, mind reeling with the impossibility of the situation. This was my backyard, my family, my barbecue, yet I was being treated like a criminal based on my own son's testimony. Terry walked beside the officers as we moved toward the house, discussing the evidence with suspicious familiarity. He knew exactly where my backpack was located, exactly which compartment I supposedly used. His knowledge was too specific, too detailed for someone who'd simply stumbled upon evidence. Zella followed behind, silent tears streaming down her carefully made-up face, but her positioning near Terry, her practiced distress, it all felt choreographed, rehearsed. As we approached the back door, I caught Terry's reflection in the kitchen window. For just a moment, when he thought no one was watching, his expression shifted. The mask of concerned son slipped, revealing something calculating underneath. My own son had called the police on me, and somehow I was walking into a trap that had been 30 years in the making. Officer Brooks spread my backpack contents across the coffee table with methodical precision. Work gloves, measuring tape, energy bars, notebook, small tools, the honest inventory of a man who'd spent decades building things rather than stealing them. Terry stood beside the table, confidence radiating from every gesture as he pointed out compartments. "It should be in the front pocket, wrapped in tissue paper. I saw him putting it there this afternoon." His certainty was damning. Too damning. No son should know his father's hiding places with such specificity, unless he'd put something there himself. Officer Brooks searched each pocket thoroughly. The main compartment yielded nothing but work debris. The side pockets contained only pens and business cards. Terry's confident expression began to crack around the edges. "Mr. Harlan," Officer Brooks said, looking up from the empty bag, "we're not finding the described item." "It has to be there." Terry's voice pitched higher, desperation creeping in. "I saw him put it in the front pocket. Check again." That's when the final piece clicked into place. Terry's inside knowledge, his nervous energy disguised as excitement, the careful way he'd guided officers to my backpack while avoiding any mention of his own belongings. "Officer," I said quietly, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice, "maybe you should check my son's dresser drawer." Terry whirled toward me, panic flashing across his features. "What? Why would you? That's ridiculous. There's no reason to—" But Officer Brooks was already moving toward the stairs, her partner following. Terry's protests grew more frantic as we climbed to the second floor, his careful composure finally shattering. "This is harassment. You can't just search our private—" "Terry Harlan," Officer Brooks interrupted as she opened his bedroom door, "we have reasonable cause based on your father's suggestion and your behavior." The dresser stood exactly as I'd left it 30 minutes earlier. Officer Martinez pulled open the middle drawer, moving aside socks and underwear with practiced efficiency. His hand found the tissue paper immediately. Terry's face went white as the ring emerged, diamonds catching the bedroom light like accusations made manifest. The same ring I'd discovered in my backpack, now resting in an evidence bag with Terry's fingerprints on the tissue wrapping. "Terry Harlan, you're under arrest for filing a false police report and possession of stolen property." The Miranda rights recitation seemed to echo from a great distance, as handcuffs clicked around my son's wrists. Zella's sobs filled the hallway, her carefully constructed performance finally collapsing into genuine despair. "This is a mistake," Terry shouted as officers escorted him toward the front door. "You don't understand. The ring was in his bag. I put it there myself." His confession hung in the air like smoke from our abandoned barbecue. Even in custody, Terry couldn't stop himself from revealing the depth of his deception. I stood in my living room, surrounded by scattered backpack contents and overturned furniture from the search, watching 30 years of fatherhood dissolve into handcuffs and accusations. Through the front window, I could see neighbors gathering on their porches, drawn by the flashing lights of police cars. Terry's voice carried from the front yard, still insisting this was all a mistake, still trying to convince officers that his victim father had somehow orchestrated his own frame-up. But the evidence told a different story, one written in tissue paper and hidden in sock drawers, authored by a son who'd mistaken his father's love for weakness. The house felt different now, emptier, as if something fundamental had been removed along with my son in handcuffs. Police documents spread across my kitchen table like pieces of a puzzle I'd never wanted to solve. Timeline sheets, evidence photos, witness statements, the paper trail of my son's betrayal laid out in official black and white. I'd been sitting here since 6 in the morning, methodically working through each detail with an engineer's precision. The coffee in Martha's favorite mug had gone cold hours ago, but I couldn't bring myself to drink from it anyway. Everything in this kitchen felt contaminated now, every surface touched by lies I'd been too trusting to see. Terry's statement to police, given before his arrest, painted a picture of a concerned son discovering his father's criminal behavior. Reading his words felt like watching a stranger wear my son's face, the calculated deception, the prepared answers. This wasn't impulse. This was months of planning. A photograph from Diamond Haven jewelry store showed the exact ring I'd found in my backpack. $18,500. The paperwork revealed Terry's credit card debt, $23,000. Most of it gambling losses from the Prairie Wind Casino. The numbers aligned with surgical precision. The job interview was his alibi for the robbery, I said aloud, my voice echoing in the empty kitchen. Speaking the truth made it real, undeniable. The fake celebration dinner, the grilled steaks, all designed to get me relaxed and off guard. If his plan had worked, I'd be sitting in a jail cell while Terry inherited this house and everything I'd worked 30 years to build. They would have let me rot in prison for their comfort. A knock at the front door interrupted my dark analysis. Through the window, I saw Cecil's familiar silhouette, concern etched in his posture. I'd known this moment would come. The neighborhood had been buzzing with police cars and rumors since yesterday evening. Ray? Cecil's voice carried the careful tone of someone approaching a wounded animal. Saw the news this morning. Thought you might need company. I opened the door to find my neighbor holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression he'd probably used on countless victims' families during his police career. Cecil understood betrayal in ways most people never would. Come in, I said, stepping aside. I'm trying to piece together how long this has been going on. Cecil surveyed the kitchen table covered in police reports and photographs. His trained eye took in the evidence with professional assessment, but his friend's heart showed in the way his shoulders sagged. This looks like a sophisticated frame-up, he said, settling into the chair across from me. Your son knew exactly how to manipulate the evidence. If you hadn't moved that ring... I still don't understand why I did that, I admitted. Pure instinct, I guess. Something felt wrong about the whole evening. Cecil studied the timeline sheet, his finger tracing Terry's movements. Your instincts saved you from a felony conviction. Look at this. They had every detail planned. The robbery timing, the planted evidence, even Zella's alibi testimony. The smell of bacon drifted from someone else's kitchen, emphasizing how normal the morning should have been. Instead, I sat surrounded by evidence that my son had tried to destroy my life for money. He would have inherited everything if I'd gone to prison, I said, the full scope finally crystallizing. The house, my retirement savings, even Martha's life insurance money. Cecil nodded grimly. And with you branded as a criminal, who would have questioned his story? Perfect crime, if you hadn't been smarter than he gave you credit for. I gathered the papers into neat stacks, my engineer's mind organizing the chaos into manageable categories: evidence, timeline, financial motive, consequences. Each stack represented a different aspect of my son's willingness to sacrifice his father for personal gain. I need legal advice, I said finally, about the house, about Zella living here, about protecting what's left. Cecil stood, understanding that this conversation marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Let's get you to a lawyer, Ray. Time to start thinking about your future instead of their betrayal. I looked around the kitchen where family meals had once brought joy, now seeing contaminated memories everywhere. The table where Terry had slammed his fist, the window where I'd witnessed his deception, the chairs where lies had been served alongside dinner. Standing felt like lifting a great weight, but also like shedding something I no longer wanted to carry. The courthouse steps felt solid beneath my feet as Cecil and I climbed toward the entrance at 8:30 sharp. 3 weeks of preparation with prosecutors had led to this moment, watching my son face consequences for trying to destroy my life. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet efficiency. Wood paneling and formal atmosphere couldn't disguise the human drama about to unfold. I adjusted my tie nervously, uncomfortable in the suit I'd worn to Martha's funeral 5 years ago. Terry sat at the defendant's table in Orange County jail clothing, handcuffed and showing the pallor of someone who'd spent weeks behind bars. When our eyes met briefly, I saw desperation replace the confidence he'd carried that night by the grill. Zella occupied a seat in the defendant's section, pale and thin, wearing what looked like borrowed formal clothes. Mr. Harlan, please describe what you observed on April 17th, the prosecutor began after I'd been sworn in. I saw my son place a stolen ring in my backpack to frame me for robbery. The words came out clear and factual, an engineer reporting observations. The defense attorney's cross-examination attempted to portray misunderstanding rather than malice. Isn't it possible you're mistaken about your son's intentions, Mr. Harlan? No, I replied simply. The evidence speaks for itself. Security footage from Diamond Haven played on the courtroom screen, showing Terry's robbery in high definition. The timestamp correlated exactly with his claimed job interview. I watched my son's face as he saw himself on camera, the moment he realized his lies had been recorded. When Judge Reed called for sentencing, Terry attempted one last outburst. Dad, you don't understand. I was desperate. The gambling debts. Terry Harlan, Judge Reed interrupted sternly, you're sentenced to 5 years in state prison for armed robbery and attempted witness tampering. The gavel's sound echoed through the courtroom like a door slamming shut on 30 years of fatherhood. Bailiffs led Terry away in shackles, His brief appeal in my direction met with my steady refusal to respond. Zella received 2 years probation and community service for her cooperation, plus a requirement to find independent housing within 30 days. The judge's explanation about rehabilitation versus punishment felt distant and academic compared to the finality of watching my son disappear through the courthouse door. As court adjourned, reporters crowded the hallway with questions about family betrayal and justice. I walked past them toward the parking garage, my mind already focused on practical matters of selling the house and starting over. Cecil matched my pace, understanding that some moments required silence rather than commentary. The courthouse elevator carried us down to street level, where normal life continued despite the destruction of mine. "How do you feel?" Cecil asked as we reached his car. "Like I just buried my son," I answered honestly, but this time it was his choice to die. The drive home passed in contemplative quiet, suburban Omaha looking different now that I knew I'd be leaving it soon. Some chapters ended with celebration, others with relief. This one ended with acceptance that family could betray deepest trust, but survival meant choosing your own well-being over obligation to those who'd forsaken you. Moving boxes lined the hallway like sentinels guarding my escape route. 30 years of accumulation reduced to essentials: tools, clothes, Martha's photographs, and legal documents that proved my innocence. Everything else, furniture, appliances, memories tied to this house, would stay behind with the ghosts. Zella emerged from the spare room carrying a single suitcase, her face pinched with desperation. The court order required her departure today, same as mine, but her destination remained uncertain, while mine pointed toward freedom. "Ray, please reconsider," she said, positioning herself between me and the front door. "I have nowhere to go. Terry made me do it. I was scared to refuse him." I paused in loading boxes, studying the woman who'd helped plan my destruction. Her wedding ring caught the morning light, the same ring she'd twisted nervously while lying about Terry's job prospects. "You should have considered consequences before betraying me," I replied calmly. "You had choices, Zella. You chose poorly." "But where will I go? I don't have any money, any family." "You'll figure it out. People who survive betrayal usually do." The realtor arrived precisely at 10 with final paperwork. Mrs. Henderson had been patient during the extended sales process, understanding that trauma took time to process. We signed documents at the kitchen table where family fights had once erupted, transforming ownership from Ray Harlan to a young couple excited about their first home. "Keys to your Denver apartment," Mrs. Henderson said, handing me a small envelope. "1 bedroom, mountain view, exactly what you requested." Cecil appeared in the doorway, having helped load the moving truck that would follow my pickup west. His handshake lasted longer than usual, acknowledging the end of one chapter and beginning of another. "Promise you'll visit within 6 months," I said, meaning it. "Promise you'll answer your phone when I call," he replied, understanding that healing required distance but not isolation. The moving truck pulled away first, carrying possessions toward a life I'd designed without input from family members who'd proven untrustworthy. I walked through empty rooms one final time, removing Terry's photographs from walls, but leaving nail holes as evidence that someone had once belonged here. In the garage, my pickup truck waited, with everything essential loaded in the bed: new Colorado license plates, new address, new phone number, the infrastructure of reinvention complete. Zella stood on the sidewalk watching as I backed out of the driveway where I'd taught Terry to ride his bicycle 20 years ago. Good memories couldn't erase betrayal, but they also couldn't prevent me from choosing happiness over obligation. Interstate signs pointed toward Denver and new possibilities. I adjusted the radio to a country music station, rolled down the windows, and felt freedom I hadn't experienced since Martha's death. Miles disappeared beneath my tires as Omaha faded in the rearview mirror. Colorado mountains appeared on the horizon like promises of elevation and fresh perspective. At 58, I was starting over completely. No family ties, no financial obligations to anyone but myself, no guilt about prioritizing my own well-being. The truck's engine hummed steadily westward, carrying a man who'd learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable those who would destroy you. Behind me lay 30 years of family loyalty. Ahead waited whatever I chose to build with the time I had left, and for the first time in years, that felt like enough. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching,